Hey, just for we were talking about this and the discourse, I thought I would show just a little more. Don't mind these white textures. This is in one of my projects, and I'm actually using that material for something else. That's why it's white. You won't have that. But anyways, I want to talk just a tiny bit about, and I brought in 3 different scenes here. Um, Post-processing. Now, if you're in URP, there's a different post-processing. Same with the HDRP. They actually have more advanced systems. Being in standard, this is just like your basic one. So if you go into Package Manager and you go into Unity Registry and look up post processing or post, you just install it. Once you have it, if I take this camera and like you can see, there's stuff here. Right, I don't know. I don't think they have any post-processing on. No, good. Right, so here's a camera. So typically, what I'll do is I'll just add a post-processing layer and a volume. So the camera, I'm going to put it on. I'll use transparent FX. So I'm going to put the camera on that same layer, and then I'm going to take the volume, mark it as global, hit the new button. It creates a little object, and now we have post-processing on this camera. There's nothing there because our profile is empty. So I can add effects. Right, and there's certain effects I love, like ambient occlusion is wonderful, especially if you're making any kind of horror games, dark dungeons and stuff like that. Really, really good. It enhances your shadows, as you can see. Like if you go hard on it, you're like got some crazy shit happening. Most post-processing effects, you don't go nuts on them. You typically just want things light, right? Like there's, none, and I would just give it just a tiny bit, right? And it makes your shadows a little more shadowish, I guess. There's some other things that you can kind of play with, right? Various things you can do with this. You can increase thicknesses and stuff. So, but it's really, I mean, they really can bring your scene alive, and it's just another avenue to let your artistic side out. And it doesn't really cost much. Auto exposure, if your camera's going in and out of the light, it changes stuff. That one's kind of hard to show. Bloom, I think when any indie discovers bloom, they overuse the piss out of it, but it's fun to use, so that's probably why. Right, and you can tell, like these things have a bit of a emission to them. You can also see it up here in the skyline. It makes lights glow, so it is a nice little effect. Use it heavy if you're going to do dreams and stuff like that. It looks really cool. Anyways, let's move on. I also really like color grading. I use the shit out of this one, such as like temperature. If I'm doing a cave or a forest or something, or dungeons, like with a forest, to me it's living. So maybe not so much a jungle, because I think moisture, but I bring the temperature up, and as you bring the temperature up, it kind of gives this tint. You can kind of see, like you go way down, it's blue, right? Like it kind of tints everything, right? So I just use it a slight bit, like if you're at pretty much 0 there, and I'll just give it a little bit, just to give it that bit of warmth. Nothing crazy. I also really, really, really love saturation. To me, especially if I'm dealing with stylized, I like to see those colors saturated, just bright, high contrast. Like some kid got in there with a fucking felt marker, right? Because you bring it down, you got the black and white type of thing, but I like to go up, and as you can see, like when it's default, down in here, I mean, it's, you know, it's there, it looks cool, but when you bring it up, I mean, it just looks so much more alive, right? Like, you also don't want to go too nuts, but I like to go up on it. Contrast, as you can see, like it has some really nice effects. So I do tend to like my contrast as well. I think that looks a lot better with some contrast. All personal preferences, of course. But again, I mean, it's just one of those things that you got to kind of play with and figure out on your own of what works for you, right? And you know what suits your game. What's some of the other ones we got here that I like to use? I like to use this one a lot too. Depending on the type of game, it just darkens out your edges, right? I mean, you can use it for various effects, but I like to give just a little bit. Just dampen those edges down a bit, helping keeping that focus in the middle. Motion blur, I don't know. I mean, it can be annoying, but at the same time, it's kind of good. But yeah, I don't know. It's also really shitty too. Depth of field is really, really good. It's a really, really useful tool. Keep this in mind, to help hide clipping distance, right? Like you got trees, you get crap way over there, and you don't want to have like your trees popping with your LODs and stuff like that. So you want to try to hide things with fog, and depth of field is another really nice way to hide that stuff, to blend the background out, right? Like if I crank that up, you can see like it's all blurred as all living hell now, right? But I can change where I'm focusing at, right? And you know, I can open it up a bit. Now let's put it around there. Oop. Right, so we have that little bit of blur. It's probably a little much. Oop. You know, you got that just a little bit of blur coming on the edges that are close to us, but it's see, it's getting like it's blurry in the background, and that really helps hide that popping distance, right? And there's more you can do with that too, right? So what else can we add? Blend distortion. The rest of that, I mean, things to play with, right? And if you mix that in with fog, I'll just use linear. You know, like you start to have a much different looking scene. If I turn my post-processing off now, like that's the before after, right? So I mean, it makes a huge difference. You get a little bit of glow happening on my little white material there. But like I said, and it's, for me, it really depends on the level, feeling to it. Like it just feels so much more real, so much more alive compared to, you know, we take that post-processing off. You see that it's got almost a dusty feel to it, right? In comparison, it's just me, right? Compared to that, right? To me, I mean, other than the rendering, which obviously there's a bunch of models here and nothing's optimized, the next highest thing is only 0.15 on them. And keep in mind, you could do that with these too. Like I'm using this as a global. They don't have to be global, right? Like you could make a big old cube. Let's go a little smaller and mark him as a trigger and put a post-processing volume. And then give him whatever that is. And then that trigger is now that area, right? So you can mark different areas differently, and then as your camera flies through, your default, you can go by default. There, everyone's default. There we go. Right, so you can use it by trigger volume too, but you see that blend weight. Like I don't have a whole lot on, but it doesn't just instantly turn on. It goes on pretty hard, right? Like that's all the way on, it's all the way off, but it has a little bit of a right. And I could ram that blend distance right up if I wanted to, right? So it's more of a gradual. Right, and you could blend those. You can blend different ones together. You can have some that are global and maybe it's doing